What was meant to be a routine televised inquiry quickly spiraled into one of the most jaw-dropping political spectacles in recent memory. Jess Phillips, a figure known for her boldness and often confrontational style, was expected to deliver strong, clear answers about the government's response to critical child protection issues. But instead, what unfolded was a slow and painful unraveling of public reckoning that would leave her humiliated and silenced on live TV. The atmosphere was tense from the beginning. As Phillips addressed the panel, the discussion focused on the government's response to the Baroness Casey report and the long-delayed implementation of the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, ICSA, recommendation. Her tone was measured, but her answers were vague. She claimed there was a published timeline, but admitted that only 4 out of 20 recommendations fell under the Home Office, implying the rest were someone else's responsibility. That deflection didn't sit well with the committee or the public watching at home. The questioning became sharper. Why had almost a year passed with so little action? Why were critical reforms, such as empowering courts to intervene in child protection cases and launching a public awareness campaign, still pending? Jess tried to explain that many of these decisions were delayed due to the government's comprehensive spending review. But for many, that excuse was too little, too late. And then, the turning point. The interviewer asked whether she had discussed the recommendations with the education secretary. Jess confirmed she had, but couldn't remember when the last meeting took place. She mentioned that Alexis J. and Janet Davey were involved in cross-government discussions, but gave no solid details. Her inability to provide direct, up-to-date answers only raised more questions. It was as if the structure behind these urgent reforms was crumbling under the weight of its own bureaucracy. Then came the pressure point, Bradford, with past failures in Rotherham, Rochdale, and Oxford still fresh in the nation's memory. Many had called for the national inquiry to expand and shine a light on areas like Bradford, where disturbing patterns have emerged again and again. The interviewer pushed Jess on this. Shouldn't the government demand that the independent inquiry investigate districts with persistent allegations? But her response struck a nerve. Instead of supporting the call, she cautioned against focusing on just 3 or 4 places, almost implying that Rotherham and others had received too much attention already. She insisted that grooming gang abuse had occurred elsewhere, across the country, and that focusing on the same towns over and over risked overlooking new victims. While this point might have had merit, the tone came off as dismissive, especially to survivors in those very communities who still haven't received justice. At that moment, everything changed. Jess Phillips was cut off. Abruptly, the host interjected, and the camera quickly shifted away. The live feed faltered for a moment before returning to the panel without her. Whispers spread across social media instantly. What just happened? Why was she silenced mid-sentence? And then, the real bombshell dropped. A breaking story began circulating in parallel to the interview. A whistleblower had reportedly leaked internal documents suggesting that multiple departments, including the Home Office, had received detailed warnings about systemic failures in child protection years ago, but failed to act. Worse, one of the departments allegedly suppressed calls for immediate investigation due to political sensitivities. The documents were still being verified, but the timing was no coincidence. Jess Phillips had been questioned on those very delays, and now it looked like she might have known more than she admitted on air. The scandal exploded. Viewers who had watched her flounder just minutes earlier were now demanding answers. Had she lied? Was this why her answers felt evasive? And why did she avoid committing to an expanded inquiry into areas like Bradford, where warning signs have been blinking red for years? It wasn't long before critics across the political spectrum began weighing in. Some accused her of trying to manage optics rather than fix the problem. Others questioned whether the government's entire response to the inquiry was a smokescreen, carefully choreographed to avoid deeper accountability. Jess's silence since the interview has only fueled the fire. She's issued no statement, no apology, no clarification. In the hours that followed, the hashtag Phillips removed began trending, alongside hashtag child protection scandal and hashtag IAA failure for many viewers. This moment wasn't just about Jess Phillips. It was a symbol of everything that's gone wrong with the government's response to some of the darkest crimes imaginable. Survivors of abuse had waited years for justice. They were promised change. They were promised action. But now it appears that the machinery behind those promises is rusted, stalling, or worse, actively resisting the truth. This moment could mark the beginning of a new political storm in Westminster. Whistleblowers are coming forward. Journalists are digging deeper, and questions are being asked that can no longer be dodged. How deep does this scandal go? Who else knew? And what was Jess Phillips really hiding behind those vague responses? One thing is certain: the public is no longer willing to wait for answers. The reckoning has begun.